or a drawn hand may contribute to the current accumulation of bonus sticks. However, only one bonus stick is added at a time after each hand, even if a dealer keep occurs at the same time as a drawn hand because the dealer was in tenpai. In an optional rule, during any hand in which there are 5 or more bonus sticks on the table, there is an additional requirement imposed in order for a hand to qualify as a winning hand. It must have at least 2 han. Furthermore, those 2 han must both be from Yaku. Just 1 han from Yaku and 1 han from Dora is not enough. There are other situations that can result in a hand ending immediately without a winner being declared. However, what happens afterwards in these cases is a little different from what follows a regular drawn hand. To distinguish them, these hands may be called null hands, or aborted hands. The Japanese term for them is tochu ryukyoku, though they can also simply be called ryukyoku. If a null hand occurs, the no tenpai penalty procedure is not performed, the seat wins do not rotate, and the hand number does not change. In essence, the hand requires a total do-over. But just like a regular drawn hand, reach bets made during a null hand still remain on the table, and a bonus stick is added for the next hand. These are all of the different situations that can result in a null hand. Different rule sets can vary on the outcomes of these conditions. Some rules may not always call for a null hand in some of them. Other rules may change whether or not the seat wins rotate or a bonus stick is added. During the very first go-around of the game, if all 4 players discard a copy of the same wind tile, the hand immediately becomes null. If all 4 players declare reach during a single hand, and no one calls ron on the discard of the 4th player to reach, the hand becomes null. At this time, all 4 players are required to reveal their hands to confirm that they are in tenpai. If all 3 other players declare ron on one player's discard, the hand becomes null. The 3 calling players are required to reveal their hands to confirm the validity of their calls. If 2 or more players declare kan a total of 4 times during a single hand, and no one calls ron on the next discard of the player who formed the 4th quad, the hand becomes null. If the player calling the 4th kan has a complete hand after drawing from the dead wall, they may still call tsumo before the null hand is invoked. Remember that this rule only applies if the 4 quads are divided amongst 2 or more players. A single player is allowed to form 4 quads all of their own without the hand becoming null. However, at this point the dead wall will have run out of tiles to draw, so declaring kan is no longer possible. The implications of this are dependent upon the rules. Some rules prohibit any player from declaring kan for the rest of the hand. Other rules allow it, but immediately invoke a null hand if a player does declare kan for a 5th time. If a player's starting hand contains at least 9 different types of terminal tiles and honor tiles, that player may choose to reveal their hand on their first turn only before drawing a tile and declare the hand to be null immediately. This is called Kyushu Kyuhai, or 9 tiles, 9 types. There are infractions a player can commit during a hand that invoke a rule called chonbo, requiring the player to pay a severe penalty to the other players. The details of chonbo are covered in their own section. If chonbo occurs during a hand, the hand becomes null. Unlike other kinds of null hands and drawn hands, chonbo is the only instance in which players that declared reach during the hand are given their 1,000-point bets back. Only the reach bets that were placed on the table during the chonbo hand are returned. It can be helpful to know the Japanese naming conventions for the hands of a game, because you will likely hear or see them used in video games. The Japanese name of a hand always starts with the current round wind, ton, nan, sha, or pei. Then the number of the hand is given, followed by the word for hand, which is kyoku. From 1 to 4, the numbers are pronounced ikkyoku, nikyoku, sankyoku, yonkyoku. So the very first hand of a game is always called ton ikkyoku, and the fourth hand of the south round would be called nan yonkyoku. The last hand of the last round in a game is also called orasu, which is a contraction of the Japanese pronunciation of all last. There are a few different ways you can translate the hand names into English. Ton ikkyoku could be called East Round First Hand, or East Round 1, or East Hand 1, or you could just leave it untranslated, anything you prefer. Now, if there are any bonus sticks on the table at the beginning of a hand, their amount gets appended to the name of the hand. In Japanese, they're counted in units called honba. So if the first hand of the game was repeated with a bonus stick added, it would be called ton ikkyoku ipponba. You can translate ipponba as something like with one bonus stick. Or you may choose not to translate the term and just say ipponba or one honba. First bonus hand is another possible translation you may see. But be careful not to get confused because consecutive bonus hands do not necessarily have to belong to the same hand number. Now, here's the procedure for calculating how many points a winning hand is worth. The actual math involved is not all that complex. The difficulty arises from all the tiny individual details that you have to remember. If you're playing a video game, scoring of hands will be taken care of for you automatically. If not, there are cheat sheets available that can help streamline the scoring process. At the very least, though, you need to know how to count the two basic components of your hand's score: han and fu. Han are the points you get from the yaku you have built into your winning hand. Each yaku in the game has a han value between 1 and 6, a score based roughly on the relative difficulty of forming a hand that satisfies it. A hand must satisfy at least one yaku to be considered a winning hand, so it will always have at least one han. However, if your hand meets the requirements of multiple yaku, every one of those yaku contributes its han value to your hand's total, except for a few yaku that aren't allowed to combine with each other. In the yaku section of the video, I will describe in detail what each yaku is called, what your hand must do to satisfy it, and how much han it's worth. Now, if you have any Dora tiles in your winning hand, this is the part where they help you out by adding extra han to your total. Each copy of a Dora tile you have in your hand is worth 1 han. If a tile counts as multiple Dora, it adds the same multiple of han to your hand. Fu are a type of points awarded to your hand based on certain factors of the difficulty of the hand's composition. They are sometimes referred to as mini points. Every winning hand always starts with 20 fu. Additional fu can be added if your hand meets any of the following criteria. If the type of basic weight that completed your hand was a pair weight, edge weight, or closed weight, your hand gains 2 fu. Two-sided weights and set weights are not worth any fu. If you were in a combined weight, you must isolate the type of basic weight that the winning tile you called applies to. For example, going out on a double pair weight is worth 2 fu even though you are weighting on multiple tiles, since either tile fulfills a single pair weight. If your hand's pair is a pair of dragon tiles, or a pair of wind tiles that match either the round wind or your current seat wind, your hand gains 2 fu. In some rules, if the round wind and your seat wind are the same, the matching pair of wind tiles counts twice and you get 4 fu. No other kind of pair is worth any fu. If there are any sets in your hand, each set is worth some fu. Sequences are worth no fu. How many fu you get for a set depends on whether it's open or closed, whether it's a triplet or quad, and whether the type of tile in the set is a terminal, honor, or simple tile. This table displays each type of set you can have and its value. There is actually a pattern to the values that may make the table easier to remember. All sets start out being worth 2 fu. If the set is closed, the fu is doubled. If the set is of any terminal or honor tile, the fu is doubled. If the set is a quad, the fu is quadrupled. In this way, the number of fu a set is worth can be any power of 2 between 2 and 32. The table is filled in with the values from the 8 possible combinations of these factors. Count the fu from each set in your hand, and add all of them to your total. If you went out off the wall by tsumo, your hand gains 2 fu. If you went out off an opponent by ron, your hand gains 10 fu if it is closed. If your hand is open, it still gains 10 fu if it has not gained any other fu from the preceding steps, and its total is still 20. With these 4 steps, all of your hand's fu have been counted. Afterwards, it is always rounded up to the next multiple of 10. This is how it works most of the time, but there are some exceptions that apply to specific yaku. Those will be presented as they arise in the yaku section of the video. Take the total amounts of fu and han your hand has been awarded, and substitute them into the following mathematical expression. Fu multiplied by 2 raised to the power of 2 plus han. The result of this expression is referred to as your hand's basic points. Here's an example. Say a winning hand has 30 fu and 4 han. Using those values in this expression, you get 30 times 2 raised to the 6th power, which equals 30 times 64, which equals 1920 basic points. If your hand has 5 han or more, you don't need to do the math and you don't need to count your hand's fu. Your basic points are determined differently. As the number of han in a hand continues to increase, the results of the basic point calculation can quickly become exceedingly large. To protect against this, at a certain threshold the calculation is skipped, and your hand is awarded a fixed limit of basic points based on its amount of han alone. The limits start being applied when your hand's basic points would total more than 2,000. This is always the case if you have 5 han, no matter how many fu you have. But it is also guaranteed if you have 4 han and at least 40 fu, or 3 han and at least 70 fu. If your hand is in any of these situations, your basic points are capped at 2,000. This is called mangan, a name which acts like a rank for your hand. Higher amounts of han are worth greater fixed amounts of basic points, and each amount carries a different rank. If you have 6 or 7 han, you receive an automatic 3,000 basic points, and your hand's rank is called haneman. If you have between 8 and 10 han, you get 4,000 basic points, and your hand is ranked baiman. With 11 or 12 han, you receive 6,000 basic points, and a rank of sanbaiman. And once you hit 13 han, your score cannot get any higher no matter how many more han you add. You've reached the limit. From that point on, your hand's rank is called Kazoe Yakuman, and it's worth 8,000 basic points. No matter how your hand's basic points were calculated, the remaining steps in the scoring procedure are always the same. So now you know your hand's basic points. Depending on the circumstances of your victory, the other players will owe you some multiple of these basic points as payment to your score. Which players have to pay what multiples is determined by 2 things: whether you went out by tsumo or ron, and whether you are the dealer or not. If you went out on a tsumo, all three opposing players are required to pay to your score. If you are not the dealer, the player who is the dealer pays 2 times the basic points, and the other non-dealer players each pay 1 times the basic points. If you are the dealer, all 3 players pay you 2 times the basic points. If you went out by calling ron, only the player who discarded into your hand pays you, but they pay you much more. If you are not the dealer, you are owed 4 times your basic points. If you are the dealer, you're owed 6 times the basic points. After the multipliers have been applied, each individual player's payment is rounded up to the next multiple of 100 points. As an example of this step, take the earlier example's basic points of 1920, and suppose the winning player was not the dealer and went out on a tsumo. The 2 non-dealer players' payment is 1 times 1920, and this gets rounded up to 2,000. The dealer's payment is 2 times 1920, or 3840, which is rounded up to 3,900. So the winning player receives a total of 7,900 points from the losing players. Now suppose the winning player was the dealer and went out on a ron. In this case, the discarding player's payment is 6 times 1920, or 11,520 points, which is rounded up to 11,600. There are scoring tables available like this one that you can use to immediately determine what the results of the preceding calculations will be once you've counted your hands fu and han. The last step is to factor in the number of bonus sticks on the table. Each bonus stick adds an extra 300 points to the total value of a hand. On a tsumo, the extra cost is split evenly between the 3 losing players, so each player pays an extra 100 points times the number of bonus sticks. On a ron, the extra cost is borne entirely by the discarding player and becomes 300 times the number of bonus sticks. Building upon the previous example one more time, suppose that there are 2 bonus sticks on the table when the hand is won. In the case of the non-dealer tsumo, the payments for the other players become 2,200 and 4,100. In the case of the dealer ron, the discarding player's payment becomes 12,200. Scoring calculation is now complete. Each losing player's payment is subtracted from their score and added to the winning player's score. The players will exchange point sticks to represent this. At this time, any points on the table from reach bets are removed from the table and added to the winner's score. This includes all reach bets that remained on the table after a drawn hand or a null hand.